Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter. Hi there guys, it's Adam Martin here, and welcome back to another instalment of the Now Review. Now, Decades of Love. This was actually quite a surprise announcement, not necessarily for the theming, but just the idea of the release in general. For those who've been following the Now Review for a while, and the Now brand if you like, the last few years have been dedicated to the Now 100 Hits series. So, a series of albums that are 5 discs, all containing 20 or so hits each, totaling to 100 hits with different themes. It worked, I liked it, I liked the concept, more songs, great, but they announced this without the 100 hits branding. This is decades of, and I'm wondering, is this the start of a new branding, or is this just a one-off? I get it from a theming sense. Valentine's Day is coming up. It's the end of January now. Valentine's Day is about 2 weeks away. And just talking about the cover, obviously the very typical colours of love, if you like, lots of reds, darker shades of pink, which I actually quite like. You've got the love hearts flying, which is a little bit cheesy, but I do get it once again for the theming. Again, I'm curious to see what's on here, but let's just take a note of the bottom here. They've gone back to adding artist names. So the greatest love songs of the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, including George Michael, Tina Turner, Elton John, ABBA, Kate Bush, Lionel Richie, The Righteous Brothers, Whitney Houston, Benny King, Billy Joel, Elvis Presley, The Beach Boys, Take That, Sinead O'Connor, and I'm sure many more. So with that, we'll do a little spin around here and have a look at this track list. The 60s, the 70s, the 80s and the 90s. I say starting with the 60s, but on closer inspection, disc 1, funnily enough, is actually the 80s, then it goes the 70s and then the 60s. I must admit, it's a rather odd way of doing things, if you like, but I mean, on the 80s side, you've got Careless Whisper, you've got Spandau Ballet with True, Duran Duran. I mean, again, a lot of classic love hits, if you like. You can see on the 70s and 60s side of things there, you're also getting a lot of classic tracks on there. I must admit, filming it from here, it is hard for me to read some of this text, so I'll leave you to read what's on there. I can see Lionel Richie's is Stuck on You. I would have thought maybe they'd gone for Hello. I thought that would have been a more seemingly obvious choice, but hey, we can go with Stuck on You. It's still a great song, absolutely. Lots of great artists I can see popping out on here, which is nice. In terms of the final track list, these first 3 discs, so you've got 19 tracks on disc 1, 21 tracks on disc 2, and 21 tracks on disc 3, so that takes us to a total of 61. Let's have a look at disc 4 and see what's there. So disc 4 is the 90s, and of course you're kicking off with one of the biggest love songs of the day, which is I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston. I'll scroll down. Nothing Compares to You by Sinead O'Connor's great too. I wonder if they got Bryan Adams' Anything I Do, I'll Do It For You, because that reigned the UK charts for 16 weeks. Wet, Wet, Wet there, track 12, came close with Lovers All Around. That was there for 15 weeks, I think, or just under that. But I can't see any Bryan Adams, which surprises me. Finishing off this album with Take That and Back for Good. Okay, and again, 19 tracks. So instead of 100 hits, if you like, the grand total track list of this album is 80. 80 tracks across 4 discs. Again, I don't like this theming, starting with the 80s, then going 70s, back to the 60s, forward to the 90s. Why they couldn't have just done 60s through to 90s. I do understand 80s music and 80s culture is very much back in the mainstream at the minute. It's very popular, so maybe that's what they wanted to spearhead with, but it's a very bizarre choice, isn't it? It's very, very, very odd. Opening up the album, there on the left you've got the front cover without the Now title, which again, you know, it's nice to a degree, the little love hearts flying around. It's a bit too cheesy for me, and that's saying a lot. Also available, you've got Now 100 Hits Legends and Now 100 Hits 60s number ones, which I think were the 2 most recent spin-offs before this one. I've done Now reviews of both of those, so you should go and check that out. And the Now playlist, actually, where there's over 100 episodes of this show for you to enjoy. And it says, follow Now Music on all their socials. They've ditched Snapchat. Is Snapchat finally dead? I haven't been on Snapchat for years, but you can follow them on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. In terms of the disc holders, I mean, they've done it like this, sort of like the old vinyl sleeve style. Now, they have done this for some of their, I think it was mainly the 60s themed albums they've done this. This is the first one that isn't just exclusively 60s, although there is a 60s disc on here. It's a very interesting choice. I don't know whether I prefer it or not. I mean, the discs are more exposed, so you could argue they're more susceptible to damage, but I can also understand maybe is this a cost-cutting measure, you know, saving on using too much plastic or cardboard, because the last thing we need is even more pollution of that kind. And I'll talk more about that in terms of the general casing, but it's interesting to see them do this for a non-60s branded release. It makes me think, are they going to do this for future releases? Just a note about the box as well. There's the spine. You might not be able to see. Look down there on the bottom. There's a little crease. I did not do that. I mean, this was delivered to me by Amazon, and I think this is the problem with cases like this. As much as I love that sort of open book style, they're very susceptible to things like creases and wear and tear. Although I absolutely do prefer them in an environmental sense, because obviously back in the day, every CD used to come in that plastic jewel case or fat box sort of style, which to be fair now still do for the main numbered series. But I understand not wanting to do a big sort of jewel case every single time, so I do welcome the change in the last 6 or 7 years to this style. In terms of the actual album, I've had a skim of the track list just after a jump cut there. And, I mean, it does what it says on the tin. You've got 80 very strong love songs on there across 4 decades. And it's always nice to see some stuff from the 60s make its way onto a now spin-off as well. Because for a very long time, it was always sort of 70s and onwards. And even then, it took them a while to embrace the 70s. But is this album worth your money? That is the question. Well, in terms of picking it up, it seemed a bit more difficult for me. Normally I go to the supermarkets, I have a Morrison's and a Tesco's near me, but neither of those had this on launch day. In fact, a lot of their media rows were quite barren. Although again, I understand this is because obviously due to the pandemic, supermarkets are focusing more on stocking and restocking essential items like food and medical supplies, which absolutely makes sense. CDs are going to be way down on the list of priorities. So I had to order it from Amazon, something I'm not always too keen on doing. Amazon has enough money as it is, but it was a needs-must situation in this case. So in terms of buying it, you might be able to get it at your local supermarket. I've seen people have been able to, but just note that you might have to turn to online suppliers in this instance, and potentially going forward, depending on how long the pandemic continues. Prices range from anywhere, I've seen it as low as 11 in some supermarkets online, to Amazon, I think we're charging either $12 or $13.99. So it's the standard fare, although give it time, and when places like HMV are able to reopen, it might be reduced down to its 2 albums for £15 range, so valued at about £8 or £9 individually. If you have a lot of the previous Now Love albums, there's been 3 or 4 before this one, you might not necessarily want to get this one if you're being picky about your releases, because it is a lot of, you know, the similar style of tracks. I mean, there's a lot more 60s stuff on here, which is nice, but it's not necessarily an essential purchase. Collectors like me are going to get this, obviously, big Now fans. If this is your first Now Love album, I wouldn't, I wouldn't say don't get it. It's a very strong contender. But again, I do question sometimes with Now in what they release. They are sort of retreading old ground. As I say, this is the 4th, maybe even 5th time we've done a Love album in Now's history. And with this new Decades of subtitle, it makes me think again, is this going to be the norm going forward, or is this a one-time thing? But that is all for this installment of the Now Review. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, and let me know in those comments down below. Are you going to pick up Now Decades of Love, or is it one of those albums that you're going to skip out on? Subscribe to the channel if you're new. We've got over 100 episodes of the Now Review you can enjoy. And until the next one, I will see you all next time. Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Hooks Media, Ben Freeman, Ethan Carberry-Holt, Bruce Danton, The Broken Kitsumanoid, Tobos Krotz, and Polsky Liz, our AMTV staff members.